Sonnet 43 by Elizabeth Barrett Browning. How do I love thee? Let me count the ways. I love thee to the depth and breadth and height my soul can reach, when feeling out of sight for the ends of being and ideal grace. I love thee to the level of every day's most quiet need, by sun and candlelight. I love thee freely, as men strive for right. I love thee purely, as they turn from praise. I love thee with the passion put to use in my old griefs, and with my childhood's faith. I love thee with a love I seemed to lose with my lost saints. I love thee with the breath, smiles, tears of all my life, and, if God choose, I shall but love thee better after death. This is a very famous poem from a very famous poet, Elizabeth Barrett Browning. She's an American poet, very celebrated, along with poets like Emily Dickinson, for being very prolific, but being significant as well. This is a poem dedicated to a specific person, to Robert Browning, who she married in secret because it was forbidden by her father. It is part of a collection of poems called Sonnets from the Portuguese, which was a very personal, very intimate sort of nickname between the couple. So although this is an expression of sort of universal, romantic, heightened, exaggerated love, it is also, despite the anonymity of it and the lack of names, it is a very personal expression of affection. I'm not going to read this slide out to you, but if you want to just ensure that you've understood it all, you might want to pause the recording here and have a read of that. But for the rest of us, we will move swiftly into a bit of analysis. So, what are some of the key ideas that you might apply in your reading of this? So it's called Sonnet 43. In the collection that it came from, there were 44 poems. You might kind of use that as a key point to suggest that this is the climactic declaration of her love in there. You can link it contextually to a lot of romantic poetry because of the transcendent nature of it. The powerful emotions elevate the personal to the universal. That's something typical of romantic poetry. Also, some of the natural imagery in there would tie it in to romantic poetry in the key idea for the romantics that we learn from nature. As simple as that. Nature teaches us. It's a Petrarchan sonnet, and so being a sonnet, it can be read as part of a tradition of love poetry. The sonnet in particular has a volta in line 9 and a turning point. You would want to find something significant to say about that if you were putting it in a literary context. We have 3 contexts for your poetry analysis. Most students will write about biographical context, and I've already given you some of that, and that is useful, but it's the sort of most straightforward one. Far more sophisticated is your sort of socio-economic historical context, tying it to events at the time that you might do with Blake and London, for instance. But I think the most sophisticated kind of context is literary context. Seeing how a text works alongside other texts is something that we find in some of the very best analysis. It is written in iambic pentameter. 2 key things that you can say about iambic pentameter. This is true for a lot of your Shakespeare as well as for your poetry. It echoes the beat of the heart. Okay, so therefore, the expressions of devotion, of deep and profound emotion, find their voice in iambic pentameter, and that would be a key point to make. But also, a little more sophisticated, is iambic pentameter very often echoes the rhythms of speech. We sort of tend to take a breath roughly every 10 syllables, as it were. And this is another romantic idea that from the very beginnings of the Romantics, Wordsworth wanted to make sure that poetry was expressed in common speech, was accessible, was to everyone, was universal, and the iambic pentameter sort of serves to do that in this poem to some extent. You might also mention the first person voice to reinforce that contextual point that this is personal. This is written by a real person to someone else. It has an intimacy and a personal element that's conveyed in those pronouns. The that anonymity that we mentioned, that sort of that penultimate bullet point there, you can make the point that it serves to emphasize this transcendent universal notion that's being conveyed here. It's a forbidden love, and in expressing and finding that forbidden love, there is some liberation. The ideas in the poem are all expansive, as you'll see, and it's about the freedom perhaps that's gained by expressing the kind of the anonymity being given voice. What's its key message? There you go. That love is not rational. It cannot be reasoned. There aren't really 7 ways of loving someone, although there are probably some self-help books that would tell you that there are. Okay, how do I love thee? It begins with a question, puts a caesura in the middle of the line, puts it into the tradition of traditional, conventional love poetry with the idea of exploration. It is, interrogative. It is a question. We are going to explore our emotions. And then that question and answer. Let me count the ways. This is not someone who is lost. This is not someone who is confused by their powerful emotions. This is someone who is delineating them. This is someone who is articulating them clearly. There's some light-hearted humour there. Let me count the ways. It's an acknowledgement of the impossibility of really defining something as elusive and powerful as love. But note the intimacy. I love thee. There is a balance there. I love thee to the depth and breadth and height my soul can reach. Depth, breadth, height. Emotion being measured, being sort of contained, but then with the enjambment into line 3, that my soul can reach. And it's not even just the dimensions of the soul. So it's not a comparison with her love being compared with something which is eternal, which is beyond mortals' ken. It's not even just that. Look at those 2 words, my soul can reach. And her soul is expanding, it's growing. So this love, which begins sort of so quietly, has within 3 lines become something infinite, something expansive. My soul can reach when feeling out of sight for the ends of being and ideal grace. I realise I apologise on this presentation. We don't have the words capitalised that you have in your anthology. She compares her love to abstract concepts such as grace and being, foundational notions of what it means to be human. She's suggesting that her love is a core part of her being. But then she shifts again in this kind of the second or third facet to her love. I love thee to the level of every day's most quiet need. And there's a real sort of drop in tone there from that heightened, expansive, again that word, transcendent emotion to here something everyday, something quotidian. That I love you like I love my cup of tea. Sorry for the analogy, but there's something familiar and intimate there. Most quiet need. Look at that. The balance there in the 2 images of light. First of all, light. You're going to say something about it bringing hope and truth into her emotional landscape. Look at the contrast. Sun. So it's therefore natural. It's powerful. It gives her life. It sustains her. Contrasted with candlelight. It's also fragile. It's delicate. This is a love which is constant in the daytime, in the sun, and the nighttime. Sun and candlelight. So in that pair of images, she contains the idea that let me move on. All right, then we have these 4 lines. I love thee freely as men strive for right. There's a nod there to some sort of kind of contextual ideas. This poem is written at a time when there are revolutions taking place, in Europe and around the world. Her love seems righteous. There's an indignation to it. There's a belief that it's somehow true, that it can change things. It's powerful. I love thee purely as they turn from praise. So that you see in the anonymity of the poem, there is a sort of a selflessness there. And I love thee with the passion put to use in my old griefs, and with my childhood's faith. Just that last image, childhood's faith, unquestioning, lacking doubt. There's an implication there that actually her faith in her God has been challenged. It has been undermined. It is still there, but it's been a little shaken. And so she recalls her childhood's faith. That the powerful emotion she has for her partner is akin to that. I love thee with a love I seemed to lose with my lost saints. There's that idea again that this romantic love for a partner has replaced, to a certain extent, a love that she had for her God, for her deity. It has a religious aspect to it. And then I love thee with the breath, smiles, tears of all my life. It is an acknowledgement, as we see in other poems, that her emotion contains multitudes. It has a range of different emotions. It's not all smiles. There are tears as well. There is an emotional breadth and depth there. And if God choose, and then here's the kicker: if God choose, I shall but love thee better after death. And we return to that initial idea at the start of the poem, that this love is eternal. She mentioned the soul, in line 2, that heaven for her will be an eternity of this romantic love. That's all we're going to cover there. There's plenty more you could say. As an example, have a look at the analysis of the first line on a site like LitCharts. The correct term for beginning with a rhetorical question is aporia. You can see the depth of the analysis there. Some lovely ideas. Feel free to go away and explore this in more detail. Thank you for listening.